Good morning, everyone. When I opened, like I'm missing a sheet of notes, I'm not. When I opened one of the sort of preparation study guides on the Psalms that Rob's been handing around for the preachers to Psalm 23, it said, surely only a vandal would attempt to dismantle Psalm 23. Well, the last time I got called a vandal was in my PE lesson when I was about 14, so I'm going to try it again. But that's because it is one of the most well-known chapters in the Bible, isn't it? Certainly one of the most well-known Psalms. There's so many songs and hymns and paintings and different things as people look to that. And there's a reason for this, because these words are so helpful. There's strength there and comfort and encouragement and hope. I think at the moment it's the only chapter in the Bible that I know off by heart. I used to know some more Psalms, but I think I'd be not honest with you if I said I still remembered them all. In lockdown, when I used to walk my dog, I used to pray through either Psalm 23 or the Lord's Prayer every time, and sort of praying through it a line and then adding it in and applying it to my situation, the world's situation, and often on my hour's dog walk I wouldn't get to the end. There's so much there, isn't there? I found one guy when I was prepping for this morning who preached a sermon on every verse, and I thought I wish I could do that because there is so much to say here, but I can't. I've got half an hour, so I have prayed specifically a lot, as we always do, for what God wants to say to us this morning. So don't come and say to me afterwards if I missed out your favourite verse or your favourite metaphor. I would say same here, but we're trusting God will speak to us and give us some good spiritual food today, aren't we? So let's read it. Oh, that's a bit small. I normally use quite a modern translation when I preach, but this is the one I know off by heart that I learned many, many years ago, so I'm going for this one today. So, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yes, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So, I'm going to work through it a little bit. So for these first couple of verses, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I thought, let's just remind ourselves of the context in which David wrote this, because we know from the Bible that David started out as a shepherd. In 1 Samuel 17, I'm just going to read it, because David knew what a shepherd was and what they did, perhaps in a way that we really don't these days. So David, as a boy, has been sent to the army. The Israelite army are cowering in fear because the Philistines, their enemies, the sort of head of that, Goliath, this great big giant man, is coming out every day and taunting them and telling them, who's going to come and fight me? And none of them dare. And David, this boy, is sent to the army to take his brothers their lunch. Don't worry about this Philistine, David told Saul. I'll go fight him. I'm just laughing because my son used to say that all the time about everything. I'll go and fight it. Don't be ridiculous, Saul, that's the king, replied. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. But David persisted. I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. And as we know in the story, David goes out with his slingshot, one stone, and he's won. But David knew what a shepherd would do. He knew that a shepherd would risk his life for the sheep. He knew that a good shepherd looks after his sheep and the level of love and care that involves. And he's also being prophetic and looking to the future in the psalm, like he does in so many, because he didn't know yet, but one day the good shepherd was going to come and tell us about that and become a sheep so that he could die to save the sheep. Jesus said in John 10, it's up there, yes, I am the good shepherd. I know my own sheep and they know me, just as my Father knows me and I know the Father. So I sacrifice my life for the sheep. This is what David is talking about. If you need nothing else this morning, maybe you need just to remember that the Lord is your shepherd. You have a good, wise, committed, fearless, powerful shepherd taking care of you. He chose to die for you that you might have life. Before he says that he's the shepherd, in that same conversation, Jesus talks about being the gate for the sheep. And he says in that phrase, he says, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come that you might have life, life in all its fullness. I was thinking, sheep don't have too many questions, do they? I think, as Alan Hoare mentioned last week, it's okay as a Christian to have some questions, to ask why and want to figure things out and want to know where we're going and what's going on. That's all right, but that can be done from a position of trust, can't it? Rather than, I'm not following you, shepherd, until you tell me where we're going and how it's going to end up and what's going on. There is a difference there. It's okay to want to understand, but sometimes we do just need to be sheep and just need to follow and trust. And when we trust God to be our shepherd, when we do follow him, when we look to him, David says, we have all we need. In that translation I read, that old version, I shall not want. Does that mean we're not going to want anything ever? I think it's okay to want things with the right motives and the right perspective. God wants good things for us, doesn't he? But it doesn't mean we're never going to want anything. It doesn't mean we're going to get everything that we want, that's for sure. It's more, I shall not be in want. So the other translations, I've put them up there, say, I lack nothing, or I have all that I need. I have everything I need when I trust God as my shepherd. And again, I wanted to put that in the context of David, who wrote this, because he was the king then. King David, building amazing palaces. He built the temple. He had so much money. He was rich. He was famous. He was really good looking. He was the musician. Everybody loved him. You could think, well, it's all right for you, David. You've got everything you need. What about me? But before then, for years, David lived on the run. King Saul, after Goliath happened a bit further on, the most powerful person in the country, who had been like a father to David, got obsessed with killing him. And he hunted him down for years. And for a long time, David had to leave behind his family, his home, everything he had, and live out in the wilderness and live in caves. He knew what it was to be hungry and thirsty, to not be able to have to rest, to be stressed out, to be depressed. We read this in the other Psalms that he wrote. He knew what it was like to be hated. And David was a warrior, so he also knew what it was to face loss and desperation. So when he talks about God leading him to green pastures and quiet streams, this isn't some fluffy, comfy 21st century UK Christian saying this. This is a man who had walked through the valley of the shadow of death many, many times. And still through all of this, he could say, the Lord is my shepherd. I have everything I need. So what do we need? I was thinking these two things here, the green pastures and the quiet streams. It talks about, it's not talking about God giving us a field, is it? This is a metaphor. Our physical needs for the sheep, that means food, it means water, it means a home and shelter, and emotional, mental, spiritual needs are there as well, isn't it? Some rest and refreshment. We need peace. We need a safe place. And the psalm goes on to talk about other things that we need. We need guidance. It talks about restoration, God giving us strength. We need protection. We need comfort. We need times of celebration and joy in our lives, don't we? And God's mercy and his love and ultimately his presence. Our good shepherd is our provider and our protector. In Israel, when David wrote this, when he'd have been a shepherd, the land's got a lot of dry, rocky places. It has these steep-sided, sort of barren valleys that are shadowy because the sun can't get in. And the shepherds used to have to take the sheep to get to the green places where the grass would be growing, and where the water was, the fertile places, they'd have to guide the sheep through the difficult terrain to get there. And the sheep were completely dependent on the shepherd there, weren't they? They didn't know where the grass was. They had to just trust that the shepherd knew what was up ahead. Jesus, when he talks about being the shepherd, he talked about how my sheep know my voice, so they follow me instead of heading off with the stranger. And we can read these words about the meadow on the streams and think, yes, please, Jesus, I'm up for that. I want this restful, lovely place. That's what I want. I'll follow you to the green meadows. Lead the way, shepherd. And then think, but we've got to go through a valley to get there. Looks a bit scary. God, are you sure it's the right way? Feels a bit dangerous. David knew that sometimes we have to go through the valley to get to the meadow. And just as he'd be wanting his sheep to follow him anywhere, wouldn't he? Trust me. I know where we're going. So God would say to us, trust me. Haven't I always been there for you? Haven't I kept you safe this far? I've been around long enough to know that I would rather be in the valley with Jesus, my good shepherd, than in the meadow anywhere else without him. Because even in the meadow, a lion or a bear could come, couldn't it? It's not the place that makes it safe. It's not our job, our good career. It's not the people that we're with. It's not the good stuff. It's not the money that keeps us safe. That's all an illusion. It's the good shepherd. It's the one who is with us. It's the one with the rod and the staff who will fight for us and keep us safe. It's because he's with us. The rod was used, that was a shorter stick that was used for fighting off the wild animals that came, and the staff, that was the longer one with like the crook, the hook on the end, that he would use to prod. The shepherd would use to keep the sheep on the right place where they were going, or maybe hook them back if they'd ended up where they shouldn't be. We all need that sometimes, don't we? The shepherd knows how much we need his protection and his guidance. He sees the danger up ahead while the sheep just got their nose in the grass with no idea. Who knows what dangers and troubles our shepherd has protected us from over the years. And just to say as well, David was writing this obviously to the Israelites, and they would have known, since they left Egypt a long, long time before, they used to call their leaders shepherds. That's how they referred to them, as shepherds. So David, who was the king and had that shepherd role, I think what he's saying here is, I can only shepherd Israel, this country God's put me in charge of, because God is my shepherd. He's the power, he's the knowledge, he's the success behind the throne, he's the real king. And that reassures us as well, doesn't it, to think no matter what sort of earthly authority people might take on or have, God is our shepherd. And I just wanted to talk a little bit, I'm not going to talk forever on the first couple of verses, but I wanted to talk a bit about, sorry, I always miss this out, about this phrase in verse 2. Some newer translations say, he lets me rest, or he lets me lie down. A lot of the older ones, that song we sang at the start says, he makes me rest. He makes me lie down. Have you ever been, look at that little baby with an overtired baby who really needs to go to bed, but they are determined they are not tired. And even though every little thing they do makes them cry because they've got nothing left, they need to be made to lie down. I was laughing with my daughter, I spoke to her this week, and she reminded me of when I used to say to my kids a lot when they were tiny, go and ask God, I don't know. And Dominic, my youngest, had a lot of big, deep questions. So I used to say to him, go and ask God, I don't know. And then one day he came and he announced to us all at bedtime, God has told me I don't need to go to bed anymore. I can choose when I go to bed. He promised us God had told him this. What do you say to your 3-year-old when I heard from God? You saying I didn't? I did. God also said, honour your mother. But as a parent, we're going to make them lie down sometimes, aren't we, as best we can. I still do it with my teenagers, to be honest, sometimes. Do you find it easy to embrace the opportunities that God is giving you to let you lie down and rest? It's okay. I'm the shepherd. I've got this. You can rest now. You've got all you need. Stop working. Stop striving. Stop trying to be good enough or have enough. Rest. Or do you need the older version that God is going to have to make you rest, to get you to admit you need a rest the hard way? I loved it when a few years ago I realised God put mandatory holidays in the Bible. Did you know this? A festival of shelters in Leviticus 23. They took a week camping, and it said, you must celebrate with joy before the Lord for 7 days. We need holidays. Isn't it sad that God had to make that a law? These festivals, these breaks, these holidays, because we're not good enough to kind of always take them ourselves, are we? What is going on with humans when we need rules like that? You must enjoy yourself. But some of us do, don't we? One of my kids said to me on holiday once, Mum, you are working so hard to try and make this a fantastic time. You just make it hard work for us. Can we just please chill? God had to schedule in feasting and joy and rest. And when God rested on the 7th day of creation, it wasn't because he was tired, was it? It was God saying, this is enough. It's very good. When we rest, it's saying, I am enough in Jesus. I am not indispensable 24/7. I'm not. Because the Lord is my shepherd and he's the power behind the throne. And it's all in him and through him and because of him. I can take some time to sit back and enjoy what me and him have done so far. And everything will not fall apart without me. It won't. It's a rest that says Jesus has done it all, so I can serve and do out of love and gratitude rather than a need to earn anything that Jesus has already died to give me. For some of you, I wonder if the one thing you need to take away from this morning is that you need to go home and book a holiday, some time off work, look at your schedule, think about what you can do about that. I think God would say to some of us here, you can feel it. You've been noticing that you are getting really tired and irritable, and your passion and your joy is waning. You've been noticing those signs of burnout. You're feeling almost trapped on that treadmill and you can't get off and you can't lie down, and Jesus says, I'm letting you lie down. I don't want to have to make you. And it's then, as verse 3 tells us, that he can restore our soul, or as some translations say, renew our strength. When it talks about soul, it's actually talking about our whole self, our body, our mind, our spirit. I read an article recently that was talking about how most women have times when they dream of having a kind of minor illness or a slight accident. And it made me smile because I'd just been having a conversation with a young woman who was completely swamped by her job and couldn't figure out how she was going to get a break. And she said, I've been fantasizing about maybe being hit by a car, just a little bit, like a slow car. So maybe I just kind of slightly break my leg and someone else has to decide what's for dinner and what we're going to do and take that responsibility. And I could say to them as a much older woman, I once had 3 children under the age of 5. I know what you mean. For me, I used to think if I got a bit more tired, maybe I'd get admitted to hospital with exhaustion and I can just sleep and rest for days, not realising then that hospital is not the most restful place, is it? And doesn't that sound absolutely terrible? I hope it wasn't just me in this. I know it's not, because I read it in the article. It's not just us that have been there. But I had this inner battle for a long time with a generation of women who were raised being told we can do anything. And as a capable, strong woman of God, I could do anything, so therefore I should do everything. And if I wasn't running on maximum capacity all the time, this was this terrible, worst ever sin of laziness. How dare I? And I knew it wasn't true. I knew my worth, my value, and my achieve is not that. It's in God and what he says about me. I knew that, but it was a constant wrestle for me over the years until I got long COVID in March 2020. I had long COVID for 2.5 years, and God made me lie down. And those first few months, I was so ill. I didn't even lie on the sofa because that felt not lying down enough. I used to just lie on the floor for hours with my eyes closed. I couldn't do anything else. And a lot of you here who were at church, they wouldn't have even known, because I'm a strong, capable woman. And it was lockdown, so we weren't talking to each other. But I was so frustrated. There's so much I need to do. There's so much I want to do. And I couldn't. God made me lie down until finally he sold me that dream for good of a life with enough rest and peace and breathing room and quiet streams built into my daily rhythm, like God tells us to in the Bible, because the Lord is my shepherd and I can say no sometimes. And if I'm feeling guilty about that, that's not restful, is it? That's not rest. He guides us along right paths for his own name's sake. Sheep don't get the glory for ending up in a good field, do they? They're not like high-fiving each other. Yeah, we found the grass. It's not them. Can we as Christians sometimes, I'm such a great Christian, look at my life, I'm doing so well, I'm so blessed. I don't think we do that very often maybe, but are we looking at someone else? They're such a good Christian, look at their life, they're so blessed. They've got it all figured out and all sorted and whatever, all good with Jesus. Is that because they happen to be in the meadow right now? And maybe you're not, maybe you're in the valley? Because we're all going to go through these different seasons. At some point in the meadow, the grass is going to run out. And you're going to have to carry on and move on to the next place. That's how life works. Maybe they're in a valley right now and you just don't see it. Maybe it's not about what we do and how amazing we are, our giftings, our wisdom, our faith. Maybe it's not about that. Maybe it's about the Good Shepherd who just says, will you trust me and follow me wherever we go? What incredible things God can do. There's another PowerPoint there, yeah. When we just follow him. Listen and follow. Trust and obey. And that's when he can restore us and protect us and provide for us. And he will guide us along the right paths. For his name's sake, through the valley to the feast that he's already preparing and already looking forward to. Whether we're in the meadow or the valley or we're sat in the presence of our enemies, what matters is that God is there too, isn't it? That's what David was saying. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, the valley of the shadow of death. The Hebrew here puts two words together. One is shadow and one is death. But the people who know this stuff, who speak Hebrew, say it's like he was saying the shadowiest of shadows, the darkest of the dark. David had been through that valley place, and he learnt there that God was with him. There are aspects of God's character that we can only see in the dark places or in the presence of our enemies. How will we ever learn how big and strong God is until we face something that is stronger than we are? How will we ever learn how wise he is, that he's got the answers, until we get to the point when we don't know where to go or what we're doing? It's those tough moments, isn't it? I find with the children that I care for, that it's in the dark moments, the dark nights, the dark places, the tough times, that I get to show them that I can be trusted, that I do actually really care for them, that I am for them and I will fight for them and I will stick with them, and I can be there as that calm rock, maybe offer some wisdom, even if inside I'm saying, God, you really need to be my shepherd because I don't know what to say or what to do here. But it's those places, those times, I've learned not to fight them or resist them or pray them away, because it's then that we get raw and we get real and our relationship grows. David knew that. Even though I walk through the valley, I don't fear. Or specifically, I fear no evil. Mark touched on the fear of God a couple of weeks ago. And it's not about looking at God and cringing in terror, is it? That's not what it meant. But I was thinking fear is something that we give power to. Some things we should be sensibly afraid of, shouldn't we, like a fire or a poisonous spider or something. But when it comes to the bigger picture, more general, when it comes to people or situations we can't control or evil, when we live in fear of that, that's because we're giving more power to that than we are to the truth that God is our shepherd and he's with us and we have everything that we need. When I grew up with the social anxiety condition, selective mutism, which is mainly characterised by an extreme fear of speaking. It's more complicated than that, but that's the most obvious symptom. People had power over me because I feared what they would think about me if I said something and how they would judge me on that. So when I made a conscious choice in my 20s to decide that actually what God said about me matters more, the person who knows me better than anyone, what he thinks about me is what counts, and to live that out, that fear just went. Because I didn't need to fear people anymore, because I was giving more fear to God and what he said, if that makes sense. Fear God, give him the power to guide you. It becomes hard when we do to fear the evil one. Fear no evil because God is with you. We have good reason to fear without him, don't we? This world is a dangerous place and evil abounds. But he is with us, even though we get the diagnosis, or even though our kids are breaking our heart again, even though we're falling apart, or it hurts, or it's hard, or it's horrible, or it is dark, and we can't see, and we don't know the way. I will not fear, David said, because you are close beside me, even when I can't see you. And God is light. It says in Psalm 139 that even the darkness is light to him, because he's light. He can see, even when we can't. I have him, so I have all I need. And where does this valley lead? It tells us, it goes on to say, to the table, where we sit and eat, we feast in the presence of our enemies. While you're in the valley, God is with you there, because he's God and he can be everywhere. He's also in the kitchen, getting the feast ready. Maybe he's making his angels do it, I don't know. Maybe someone needs to hear today in the valley that God is saying to you, the oven is on. We're chopping, we're prepping, we're getting ready. It's not going to last forever. He knows where you are, and he knows where you're going. And what is a feast? What is a table? I was thinking it's welcome, isn't it? It's let me serve you. It's abundance, it's more than enough, it's energy, it's joy, it's potentially more rest. The evil things might still be there. David says, in the presence of my enemies. He didn't say here, though he does in other Psalms, that God destroys the enemies. He's not saying that here. Or he's taken me so far away that the enemies can't see me and I can't see them. In heaven that will happen, but not here. He's saying, he's not saying, I don't have to fear because God has killed all my enemies. He's saying, I don't have to fear because even when I'm sat looking at my enemies and they can see me, I'm sat with God at his table and he protects me. You could say, I'm still fighting these enemies, God. I'm still ill. I'm still grieving. I'm still hurting. I'm still broke. I've still got no job. I've still got no answer. I'm still being rejected. And God would say, come and feast on my peace and my hope and my joy and the security of my promises that I'm with you. In the presence of our enemies, that's where God can show us his provision and his faithfulness and his glory. So what will you choose? To cower away, to hide in the fear of your enemy, or to trust God enough to sit at the table confident they can see you, where you can take hold of that cup that he has filled to overflowing with blessing? Are you defining your situation by the enemies that you face, or by who you sit with while you face them? And there's so much I could talk about here, but I'm going to skip now because we're nearly finished to the last verse. There it is. And David says, I will dwell in the house of God forever. We can think of that as heaven. I've always read that and thought that means living forever in heaven with God, but that's not actually what David's talking about. The Hebrew there is not talking about heaven. It's talking about the word they had for the temple, or maybe even a palace. But in those days, in the Old Testament, the temple that David, he didn't build it, the permanent one, did he? Solomon did, his son. But that was where God lived. And God's everywhere, but in some mysterious God way, he made his home in the temple, in the Holy of Holies, behind the curtain that only the special priest was allowed in once a year to go and see. So what David is talking about here when he talks about dwelling in the house, in the temple of God forever, he's talking about being in God's presence forever. And we know we can do that because when Jesus died, when the Good Shepherd came and died for the sheep, the curtain in the temple tore in two to symbolize and show that we now have that access to God all the time, whenever we need it, whenever we want it. It says in Hebrews 4:16 says, let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God. And it talks about how we are seated with him there in the throne room because of what Jesus did on the cross. And this should make a difference, shouldn't it, to how we face our enemies or the valley, our fears, that we're living with God at home in his presence. When you're living in someone's home, you get to know them, don't you? You get to know their habits and what time they get up and how they actually really spend their time, who they really are. And that is the whole point of life, isn't it? That we get to know God like that as he knows us. So then we can trust him. That wherever he takes us, And whatever life brings, in the meadow, by the stream, in the valley, facing our enemies, at the feast, he will be our shepherd who cares for us and loves us like no other. And he will restore us and give us all we need to keep going. And he will guide us for his name's sake. It's his reputation at stake here. And he will be glorified then when we trust him. Like I said, there's loads more I could talk about. I could talk about the cup. I could talk about the oil anointing and all that means and the mercy, but I just wanted to finish by saying, let's feast on this truth that the Lord, the Holy One, is our shepherd. He gave his life that we might be at home in his presence forever. He is our protector and our provider and our restorer and our guide. Who shall we fear when he is close beside us? Why would we give that power, that glory, that honour to anything else apart from God? So let's commit to listening for his voice so that we can follow him as we trust that he will lead us to blessing and be with us every step of the way. We're going to sing. Be good to pray, wouldn't it? One of the verses I'm praying a lot for people this year is in Ephesians. It talks about that Paul's prayer for the Ephesians is that they would experience the love of Jesus. And I just think that's lovely, isn't it? That's beyond just thinking it in our head, but actually experiencing it for ourselves. So I'm going to pray that for us this morning. God, I thank you for this incredible psalm, these incredible words here. I know there's so much more you would have to say to us about this. But if nothing else, God, may we know it today, that you are our shepherd and you are good. You're a good shepherd with good plans for us, good things in store. And for those of us who feel really in the valley now, and it's hard and it's horrible and it's dark and we hate it, God, may we know your presence like never before. Your comfort, your strength, may we put our hand in yours and trust you as you lead us through.